A quiet act of kindness on a red-eye flight leads a single dad and a grieving mother toward unexpected connection, healing, and the gentle beginning of a found family. Now, before we begin, if you believe in healing in chosen families and the quiet magic of kindness, subscribe and let's walk this path together. Snow clung to the wings like frostbitten lace. The engines whispered a slow and steady breath, as if the plane itself were reluctant to leave the quiet of the earth behind. The boarding bridge hissed closed, and somewhere near the front of the aircraft, a baby began to cry. It wasn't loud, not yet, just the restless whimper of a child whose world had shifted too many times in one day. The sound drifted back through the dim cabin, threading itself through murmurs and muted coughs, through the rustle of coat sleeves and the soft clang of overhead bins. Eli Granger exhaled through his nose and closed his eyes. His coat smelled faintly of fireplace smoke and the cedar chest where he kept the things he hadn't been able to throw away. He adjusted the duffel at his feet with the toe of one boot and leaned his head back. The hum of the airplane became a cradle of sorts, familiar in its impersonality. He had flown a dozen times since she passed, and every time it felt the same. Hollow, necessary, quiet, the folded note in his coat pocket pressed against his heart like a living thing. It was written in purple crayon, with uneven lines and a backwards E in the word smile. He hadn't dared open again since he left her, bundled in a too big scarf and her grandfather's hand-me-down mittens. She had pressed it into his hand before sunrise and whispered like it was a spell. "Make someone smile for me today, Daddy. That's your job while you're gone." His lips had twitched at that. Smiling had never come easily to him. Not since the hospital. Not since the machines fell quiet, and he had to teach himself how to pack lunches and braid hair. But he promised her anyway. Because what else do you promise a 6-year-old with her mother's eyes? The lights dimmed. Flight attendants began to check belts and straighten seatbacks. Eli blinked slowly, eyes dragging over the soft golden glow of the first-class cabin. There was something almost church-like about it, sterile, reverent, untouched by the fray. It was one small kindness he could afford himself on this trip, a rare business-class upgrade, courtesy of accumulated miles and silent apologies. The crying grew louder. It was no longer just a fuss. It was distress, the kind that came from overtired lungs and tiny clenched fists. He turned his head, scanning the aisle, and saw her. The woman moved like she was trying not to disturb air itself. Late 20s, maybe, tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from sleep deprivation, but from a soul stretched thin. She was balancing a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, her bag slung too loosely over one shoulder. The line behind her had stopped moving. A few grumbles rose. A flight attendant stepped forward, whispering something urgent. The woman flushed. Her voice was a soft thread. "Sorry. I thought I had the right. I'm sorry." Eli stood up. He didn't think about it. His body moved before his thoughts caught up. The motion startled a man in 3C, who instinctively clutched his briefcase closer. Eli raised his hand just a little and met the woman's eyes. "You can have my seat," he said. It was a plain sentence. No frills. No offer of heroics. She blinked. I don't mean to cause." "You're not," he said gently. "It's fine. Really." The flight attendant looked between them, already recalibrating. Rules bent easier for quiet gestures. The woman hesitated. The baby gave a sharp hiccup of a sob. Eli stepped into the aisle, moved past her with a quiet nod, and pointed toward her new seat. Window. Good light for calming him. She clutched the baby tighter. "Thank you." He offered a brief, tired smile. "Make someone smile, right?" She looked at him then, not just a glance, but a searching, wide-eyed look, as if trying to place where he came from, why he'd done what he'd done. He didn't explain, didn't wait for applause. He just slipped past, duffel in hand, heading down the narrow corridor to economy. Back in 22B, the air smelled like aftershave and crackers. The man beside him was already asleep, mouth open, headphones in, The seat wouldn't recline all the way, and the tray table jutted into his knees. But the note in his coat pocket felt warmer now, like it had done something good. He sat, folded his hands, and stared out at the icy tarmac. Lena Lane eased herself into the business class seat with trembling fingers. She adjusted the baby in her lap, his tiny fist gripping the collar of her shirt. The infant was warm, drowsy now, beginning to settle. She inhaled, exhaled. The seat cradled her like a mercy she hadn't earned. All she had wanted was to travel unseen, to slip onto this red-eye flight, no one recognizing her name on the manifest, no one whispering boardroom rumors or press leaks. Just one quiet journey with her son, away from the lawyers in the silence of an empty apartment full of clothes that still smelled like her husband. She hadn't expected kindness, especially not the kind without strings. The man hadn't asked her name. He hadn't looked twice at her clothes or the crying. He had just offered. She looked toward the economy cabin, searching for a glimpse of him, but he had vanished into the rows like mist. The baby gave a soft, hiccupy sigh and fell into sleep against her. The plane began to taxi. Outside the window, snow drifted sideways under the floodlights, like ash from a fire she didn't remember lighting. The seatbelt light blinked on. The engine deepened its voice. Eli rested his head against the cool plastic wall of the plane. His mind floated back to the last conversation before he left. "You never do anything for yourself," his sister had said. "Take the upgrade. Live like a human being for once." He had laughed and changed the subject. And then there was the letter. He unfolded it slowly now, hands roughened from winters of splitting wood, from fixing what was left in the house. The purple crayon was beginning to smudge at the edges, but her words still shone. "Dear Daddy, be nice to someone on the plane. Maybe it's a sad person, or a baby person, or just someone who needs a hero, but doesn't know it yet. I miss you already. Love, your girl." He folded it again, smaller this time, and tucked it back against his heart. The plane climbed into the dark. Up in first class, Lena blinked back a sudden sting behind her eyes. Her son's head was heavy against her chest, the rhythm of his breathing syncing with the rise and fall of the engines. She reached into her carry-on for a notebook, not the one her assistant usually carried. This one was older, personal, frayed at the corners. She flipped to a page titled, "Things Worth Remembering When I Forget Who I Am." She wrote, "Stranger gave up his seat, without needing to be asked. My son stopped crying for the first time today. Maybe goodness still lives where no one claps." She closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest. 23 rows behind her, Eli drifted in and out of sleep. The man beside him snored lightly. Somewhere overhead, the seatbelt sign dimmed. He let his eyes close, the thrum of altitude like a lullaby for the soul. The plane soared on, 2 stories stitched by silence and stitched by something else, too, something neither of them yet recognized but would. Soon, the sky outside was velvet black, speckled with stars that looked close enough to touch if one only dared lean against the window long enough. The cabin had fallen into a hush, the kind that only comes after takeoff when the world has officially slipped away behind you and the engines settle into their slow lullaby. A flight attendant glided silently past Eli's seat in 22B, checking trays and blankets, whispering a wordless language of reassurance. Somewhere in the distance, a baby stirred. Eli stirred too, not from noise, from the small ache that always came when the world around him quieted down. That ache made space for thoughts, the kind he tried to outrun with motion and errands and little jokes for his daughter. But motion wasn't possible here, in a cramped seat between strangers who snored and mumbled in their dreams. He blinked at the tray in front of him, empty but for a cup of water that had gone untouched. His hands were folded in his lap, still, unused to stillness. Across the cabin and 2 classes away, Lena sat by her window, watching the faint reflections of her own eyes looking back at her. The baby had drifted into a deeper sleep now, head resting heavily in the crook of her arm, a weight that was both anchor and tether, holding her to this moment, keeping her from slipping entirely into memory. She couldn't stop thinking about the man, not in a romantic sense, not even that, but in the way a person clings to something simple after too much complexity. He hadn't known her name, hadn't asked, hadn't offered the seat with performative flourish or pity, just handed over his own comfort like he was used to doing it. She remembered people like that. Her husband had been one of them, quietly brave, softly noble, never loud, never needing to be. She shifted in her seat and pressed her lips to her son's head. He smelled faintly of milk and sleep. She had almost not boarded this flight at all. The airline had been her idea in the beginning. A dream born not of money but of flight itself, of reclaiming something beautiful in the air after her husband's death. But dreams grow teeth in boardrooms. And ever since she'd stepped back during her pregnancy, they'd tried to close the doors behind her. That's why she flew now under a different name. That's why her boarding pass had been booked through a friend. Her real identity folded away like an old love letter. She just wanted to see if the sky still felt the same. She just hadn't expected anyone to look at her with kindness when she wasn't someone important. The baby gave a sigh, soft as cloth. She reached down and tucked the edge of the blue blanket beneath his chin. And then, because something in her needed to, she rose. It was slow, careful, the baby still sleeping against her shoulder as she made her way toward the back of the plane. No flight attendant stopped her. No one questioned the odd sight of a first-class passenger weaving through economy with a child in her arms. She found him standing by the lavatory, stretching out a leg and rubbing at his neck. She wasn't even sure how she recognized him from behind, but she did. He turned as she approached, blinking like he hadn't expected conversation from anyone on this side of the curtain. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, softly. He glanced around, then back at her. "You already did." "Not properly." He smiled faintly. "Well, properly or not, it made you look less tired. That's good enough for me." She looked at him more closely now. His eyes were gentle in the low light, his face lined in ways that spoke of long nights and a weariness carried without complaint. He looked like someone who'd learned to carry other people's weight without announcing it. "I thought you were a businessman," she said quietly. "Not anymore. These days I'm just a dad who works on old barns and reads bedtime stories about talking frogs." "That sounds better." "It is," he admitted. "Most days. You," she hesitated, "used to be someone else. Now I'm just a mom trying to keep her kid from crying in the dark." His eyes softened. "You did good. He's sleeping." She laughed, a little breath catching in it. "For now." They stood there between two aisles, held in a kind of suspended grace. Neither quite a stranger anymore, neither knowing the other's last name. "I'm Eli," he said after a long silence. She nodded. "Lena. Well, Lena, it's good to meet you." He gestured to baby. "And him." "Jonah. Strong name." They fell into silence again. It wasn't awkward. She shifted her weight slightly, careful not to wake the child. "Do you travel often?" "Not unless I have to. My daughter asked me to do something kind while I was away. Guess that was you." Lena blinked. "Your daughter asked you that?" "Yeah." He pulled something from his coat pocket and unfolded it with a certain reverence. "Left me a note, purple crayon and all." He didn't show her the whole thing, just the last line. "Make someone smile for me, Daddy." She smiled. "I think she'd be proud." "I think so, too. Maybe I should write something down for Jonah when he's old enough." "You should. They remember more than we think." She looked down at her sleeping son, his little hand curled into her collar like a question mark. "I didn't think I'd do this alone," she whispered. Eli didn't say anything, just shifted slightly, not turning away. Lena caught herself. "I'm sorry. That's not your burden." "It's not a burden," he said gently. "It's just true." She closed her eyes for a second, then nodded. A quiet moment passed before she asked, "Would it be all right if I gave you something? You don't have to." "I want to. Just a small thing." He hesitated, but nodded. Back in her seat, she opened her notebook again, tore a page neatly, folded it once, then again, wrote something on the outside, pressed it flat with her palm. She handed it to a passing attendant with quiet instruction. The attendant blinked at the name, looked toward the back of the plane, then nodded with a smile and carried it off. Lena sat back, eyes on the stars again, and waited. Eli unfolded the paper with a puzzled expression. On the front, it simply said, "For when you need a soft place to land." Inside was a voucher, first class, open-ended, no expiration, no signature, no name, just that quiet sentence. He stared at it for a long time, then tucked it beside his daughter's letter. The plane rocked slightly in turbulence, then steadied. In first class, Lena returned her son's head to her chest and closed her eyes. She whispered aloud, to no one in particular, "You would have liked him." The darkness outside the windows deepened. But inside, in two very different seats, two people held on to small pieces of paper, like they mattered more than anything they brought on board. And maybe quietly they did. Somewhere between the black edge of night and the silver beginning of dawn, the plane began to descend. It started as a subtle tilt, barely perceptible, just enough to shift the cabin's breath. The sky outside had lightened, not fully morning, but the kind of hour that belongs to in-betweens. Fog and frost, dreams and waking. Eli opened his eyes to the slow dip of altitude. The man beside him was still asleep, headphones askew, mouth half open. A smear of drool clung to his chin like morning dew. Eli sat quietly, hands resting over the front pocket of his coat, where folded papers still lived. One in crayon, one in elegant ink. He hadn't slept much, just dozed in and out, lulled by the engine and the weight of small thoughts. The note from the woman, Lena, was still heavy in his mind. He hadn't known people like her existed outside of rare moments, rare nights. That someone with shadows under her eyes and a child in her arms could speak so softly, yet leave such an imprint. He read her note again. For when you need a soft place to land, it wasn't a gift. It was a gesture. And gestures, he learned, carried more than price tags ever could. They were echoes, evidence that you'd mattered, even for a moment. A quiet chime sounded overhead. They were beginning their descent. A rustle passed through the cabin, like a breeze through tall grass. Seats straightened, windows unshaded. People stirred from the grip of airplane sleep, stretching shoulders, rubbing eyes, checking phones that had no signal. In first class, Lena adjusted her seat and shifted Jonah to the crook of her right arm. He was still sleeping, though lighter now. His lips parted, tiny breath catching with a change in pressure. She rubbed his back in circles, slow and deliberate. A flight attendant leaned in, murmured something kind. She nodded, murmured back. Her voice was always soft in the morning, less guarded. That was something her husband had once told her, that her voice in the morning was the only thing that ever made him feel grounded, even from the cockpit. Lena looked out the window. The clouds beneath them were thick and low, the city still hidden beneath its quilt of winter. Her reflection hovered in the glass, layered over the growing daylight. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a small envelope, not addressed, just something she hadn't found the courage to send. A letter to the board, or maybe to herself. She tore it in half, then in quarters, let the pieces fall softly into the seatback pocket. She was done hiding behind names. The baby shifted again, and her thoughts returned to the man in 22B. To Eli, he had been kind without hesitation, and that, she had realized somewhere in the sleepless lull between time zones, was the rarest kind of person, the ones who gave without announcing, who saw a tired stranger and offered comfort without needing credit. It was the kind of person she wanted her son to grow up around. Not just someone good, but someone quietly good, The plane dipped again, more steeply now. The horizon reappeared, tinged with a golden hue that promised thaw. Morning would arrive soon, whether or not anyone was ready for it. Back in economy. Eli shifted in his seat, knees pressed against the tray table. He craned his neck, adjusting his posture to catch a glimpse down the aisle. He wasn't looking for anything, really. Just checking the view. Just checking. The woman in 5A was watching him. He saw the faintest movement, her gaze flicking away not quickly but gently. A silent acknowledgement. He wasn't sure what it meant. A baby began to fuss. It wasn't a cry, not yet. Just a preamble. The restlessness. The way small bodies complain before they even know why. Eli stood up, not dramatically, not heroically, just rose, as if his body had known before he did that he was needed. He walked carefully up the aisle, pausing at the edge of the curtain that separated the classes like a veil in a half-remembered dream. One of the attendants looked at him, confused, but said nothing. Lena looked up as he approached. "Mind if I offer a hand?" he asked, eyes glancing at Jonah, who was now squirming in her arms. Her grip had slipped slightly, her posture strained from holding too long, the kind of fatigue that seeped deep into the bones. She blinked, hesitated, and then nodded. He took the baby gently, supporting the neck like a memory. Jonah tensed at first, then relaxed. The shift was nearly immediate. "You've done this before," she murmured, relief softening her features. "I have," he said. "My daughter used to scream every time the plane tilted. Holding her like this helped." "You're a natural." "I was terrible at first," he admitted, panicked over every hiccup. "Googled things at 3 a.m. She smiled. Jonah made a cooing sound. Eyes opened halfway, then closed again, as if the descent was a lullaby he could trust now. "Does your daughter still fly with you?" Lena asked, voice quieter now. "Sometimes, when I can afford to take her somewhere that isn't just another errand. She likes trains more." "How old is she?" 6, going on 16. "She sounds lovely." "She is. Fierce. Kind. She's the one who told me to make someone smile today. She'd be glad you did." They stood like that for a minute, shoulder to shoulder, sharing the weight of a child, in a silence that wasn't awkward at all. The plane continued its slow, final arc toward the ground. Landing gear extended with mechanical shudder beneath their feet. "I should sit," he said softly, "before we touch down." She reached for her son. Their hands brushed in exchange. "Thank you," she said. He met her gaze. "Always." As he turned to leave, she stopped him with a word. "Eli." He paused, halfway back into economy. She pulled a card from her purse. Not a business card, just a simple cream rectangle, handwritten. She held it out. "For when you fly again." He took it. On the back, in blue ink, it said, "To the man who made my son's first flight feel safe." He tucked it into his coat without reading it again. Sometimes once is enough. The plane touched down with a soft bounce and a groan of tires. Passengers applauded, as they often do, their hands brief punctuation marks against the steady exhale of engines. Eli waited to stand. Let the others crowd the aisles. Let the rush pass him by. Lena gathered her son, still drowsy, into her arms. She didn't look back until she was almost at the door. He was still seated, still watching the line of people pass. A man perfectly content not to be noticed. But she noticed, and that would be enough. Outside, the runway glistened with fresh melt. The city beyond was wrapped in the pale gold of beginning again. And somewhere between gate and baggage claim, 2 stories continued quietly, separately, for now, but not for long. It began again with boarding passes and gate announcements, with a slow procession of tired travelers inching forward under fluorescent lights. A different airport, a few weeks later, a different kind of quiet. This time, Eli held a small hand in his. His daughter, Hazel, 6, all fire and freckles, clutched a drawing pad in one hand and the handle of a ladybug-printed suitcase in the other. She walked with that unbothered purpose only children have, chatting about clouds and what snacks they might get on the plane, completely unaware of how her father's heart beat a little differently now as they moved toward the jet bridge. It had been weeks since that red-eye, since the baby's cry, the exchange seat, the note written in blue ink and handed off like a secret. Eli hadn't planned to fly again so soon. But Hazel's school break and a quiet invitation from an old friend out west had made it possible. And then there had been the envelope, the one waiting for him in the mailbox days after he'd returned home. No return address, just a first-class ticket with his name on it and a hand-penned message tucked inside. For when it's not just you. He hadn't told Hazel much, just that they were going on an adventure. She hadn't needed more. At the gate, a flight attendant greeted them by name. That alone surprised him. "Mr. Granger, welcome aboard. We've arranged everything. Please follow me." He looked down at Hazel. She beamed up at the woman like a celebrity had said her name. Their seats were near the front. First class. Window and aisle. A little extra room for legs that like to swing and sketchbooks that like to sprawl. "Daddy," Hazel whispered, climbing into her seat and bouncing once. "This is like a princess room on an airplane." He smiled, ruffling her hair. "I think it's just called first class." She opened her sketch pad and began drawing with all the solemnity of a court painter. Her lines were crooked, but her colors were fierce. He let himself lean back. Just once. And then he saw her. Lena stepped on board carrying Jonah, slightly bigger now, more alert, his head turning as they crossed the threshold. Her eyes caught his instantly, not with surprise, not with disbelief, but with something gentler. Recognition. She smiled. Eli stood halfway. "I didn't know you'd be on this flight," he said. "Didn't you?" she asked, settling into the seat across the aisle. "I sent the ticket." He blinked. "That was you?" She tilted her head, a touch of mischief in it. "Who else would it be?" Hazel peeked up from her drawing. "Is that your friend, Daddy?" Lena looked at her and softened. "Hi, I'm Lena, and this is Jonah." Hazel waved. "I'm Hazel. My dad says I'm fierce." "You look it," Lena said, "in the best way." Jonah reached out, fascinated by Hazel's colorful markers. She held one out for him to see, a bright green. And just like that, the aisle between them felt smaller. The plane began its slow crawl toward the runway, engines humming low, like a cello tuning before the first note. Lights dimmed. Cabin pressure shifted. Outside, the runway lights blinked in the encroaching dusk. Eli leaned over. "You didn't have to do all this." Lena looked down at Jonah, then back at him. "I wanted to. Still, thank you." She shrugged lightly. "You gave me a seat. I gave you two. Seems fair." He chuckled. "Is this how you run your airline? You figured it out." "I saw your name on the seat assignment," he said quietly. "And I remember what the attendant called you that night." She nodded. He studied her. "Why not just tell me?" "Because I want to be nobody for a while. You didn't treat me like I was anything else." The plane lifted from the runway, wheels tucking into its belly like folded promises. The sky swallowed them whole. Hazel hummed as she colored. Jonah babbled quietly, one hand tugging at the zipper on his mother's sweater. Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a soft toy, handing it to him without a word. They flew like that for a while. Two parents, two children, and something fragile blooming in the quiet between. Eli leaned toward Lena. "She's curious about you. She's welcome to ask." Hazel didn't wait for permission. "Did you really fly the plane?" Lena laughed. "Not this one. But I used to fly a long time ago." Hazel's eyes widened. "Like a superhero?" "Something like that." Eli smiled as his daughter leaned into the story, wide-eyed. He watched as Lena spoke to her, voice gentle, full of grace, letting the girl's wonder steer the conversation. Later, when both children had nodded off, Hazel with her sketch pad cradled against her chest, Jonah with his fingers curled around the edge of his blanket. Eli turned to Lena again. "They'd get along," he said. "They already do. You know," he said, quieter now, "I didn't think anything good would come out of flying again. That last trip, it was about putting something to rest. And this one feels more like opening a door." She nodded. "I was married," she said, after a pause. "He was a pilot. Loved the sky more than anything." "I'm sorry." She nodded once, the kind of nod that means thank you and yes, and I don't talk about this often. "I took over the airline after. I wasn't supposed to. They said it was too emotional, that I'd make decisions with my heart." "And did you?" "I hope so." He looked at her then, really looked. "You did with me?" She looked away for a second, smiled faintly. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what it means to come back to yourself. Not the version the world wants, just the one that survived. I know that feeling." "Maybe we don't survive alone," she said softly. "Maybe it's always because someone gives up a seat, or holds a baby, or just sees you when you don't know if you're visible anymore." He didn't answer right away. There was nothing to say that would be better than letting her words stand. The overhead lights flickered once, an announcement of descent. Hazel stirred and blinked up at him. "Are we almost home?" He brushed hair from her face. "Getting there." Lena adjusted Jonah, kissed the top of his head. "I like flying with you," Hazel mumbled, half asleep. Eli met Lena's gaze over her daughter's curls. "She doesn't say that often. She should. She's still learning how to feel safe again." "We all are." The plane dipped, tracing a smooth arc toward landing. Below them, the world was studded with lights. Homes, cars, lamplight pools on empty streets. Somewhere down there, life waited. But for a few more minutes, the sky was theirs. Hazel reached into her sketch pad and tore out a page. It was a picture of a woman and a man sitting across an aisle, with two children laughing between them. She handed it to Lena. "For you," she said. "It's a picture of now." Lena folded it gently. "It's perfect." The wheels touched down with barely a bump. The runway slid beneath them like a ribbon being unspooled. The plane slowed, sighed, and something inside both of them settled too. Passengers gathered their things. The lights brightened. Eli reached for his bag. Lena adjusted her son. Hazel stretched like a cat. At the gate, Lena touched his arm before he stepped away. "There's a card in Hazel's bag," she said, "just in case." "In case?" "In case you ever want to sit beside me next time." He smiled. "She'll like that. I think I will too." Outside the terminal, the wind was cool, but not cruel. Eli lifted Hazel's suitcase and took her hand. Lena stood a few feet away, Jonah tucked against her shoulder, his eyes fluttering shut again. Their paths parted then gently. No drama, no promises. But in the pocket of Hazel's backpack, Eli found the card later. Just a name and a sentence written in her graceful, steady hand. "Sometimes kindness is the beginning of everything." He folded it carefully, slipped it beside the crayon note and the voucher. 3 pieces of paper, all still warm. If this story touched your heart, subscribe. There are more like these to follow.